Hello and welcome to the Unusual Stories podcast. My name is Wojciech Salski, I'll be your host for today. And before we start, may I just remind you, if you'd like this podcast to be any better and growing, and if you find it interesting, entertaining, in any way useful, I would say, then please do follow the link below or click on your, maybe Spotify or on YouTube, wherever you're watching it, click the subscribe button and follow my work. I think this is the best kind of, support you can give. It helps the podcast grow. And in terms of supporting in any other way, if you'd like to share it with a friend, maybe someone is looking for a new book to read, or maybe they're struggling with some of the topics that we've discussed so far. And by sharing this with them, you're allowing this podcast to reach more people. That will be an amazing support. And if you'd like to support the podcast in any other way, then follow the link below. There is an option for you to, either send me an email, maybe suggest a book that I should review, or a topic you'd like me to explore a bit more. Maybe you have some advice for me. Maybe my voice should be revamped, or maybe I should get a new microphone, or maybe the book setup is not the right way. Maybe I need a new wardrobe. Whatever you say, maybe you'd like to support me financially. That's also very, very wonderful. And for all of you out there who are already, supporting, either sending me the messages or commenting, or literally supporting financially, I'm very grateful for that. For now and forever, this is my hobby and passion, but I do have the hope that over time this will become a full-blown endeavor, and I have no doubt it will happen. I feel like I'm young enough to still have to learn the few things before that happens, but with the new logo coming up, a new brand really coming up soon, I've been actually seriously considering trademarking it, copyrights, because I feel like this might be the sort of the final logo and the brand. So yeah, whatever. If you'd like to support it and you find the podcast fun, then please do. And I thank you and bow to you for doing so. Now, in terms of today's episode, I must say this might be one of the most preparation I've done for an episode in a while. So probably Maps of Meaning and maybe the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying were the two episodes which also made me do as much preparation as today. But to be fair, considering this book being much smaller than these two I just mentioned, I feel like this might just be the biggest preparation I've done relatively, proportionally to the size of the book. And it is for a reason. It's one of those books that actually disturbed me deeply. It sits somewhere between The Creature from Jekyll Island and the real Anthony Fauci, and probably The Sovereign Individual. These books, and this one, which is called Ultra Processed People by Chris van Tulleken. Ultra Processed People. This is us, by the way. Is it truly disturbing, and in many ways, I don't know, I've seen the book on shelves of like organic stores, and then I've seen some short clip about the book, and I don't know, something clicked in me recently, and I've decided to give it a read. And here we are, I've just opened another can of worms, if anything. And my disclaimer to you at the beginning of this episode is that this is a truly serious topic. It's also one that is definitely affecting you on the daily basis, especially if you live in one of the countries such as UK, Australia, United States or Canada. These are the top 4 in terms of the ultra-processed food consumption countries that the author talks about. And, I live in the UK. And to be honest with you, maybe thanks to my background, thanks to being from Poland, I don't think I've fallen that much of a victim to this, ultra-processed food tragedy, really. I think a pandemic of a sort. But on the daily basis, I see people at work eating meal deals. If you're from the UK, you know what I mean. Meal deals in the UK is a sort of like this deal at, in a local corner shop, in every corner shop really, on every bus stop, on every train station, everywhere. The meal deal is basically a drink, usually a soft drink, although some people like myself are crazy enough to choose water, but it's usually a soft drink, let's be honest. And then a sandwich, and obviously this is the kind of sandwich that would be able to last probably a few days, if not more, out of the fridge, and is filled with the UPF, which stands for ultra processed foods, with UPF ingredients, about which I'll talk in a moment, and then some sort of a snack. And obviously, yet again, you can be a crazy person like myself that takes a banana or apple, but if you're like the majority of people and you are going for a meal deal, you're likely to end up with a Mars bar or maybe some sort of a pastry to eat with that sandwich. And so all in all, in many ways, and this is just a very short introduction in a sense. It's like setting the scene, especially that I am from the UK right now. For sure, I do consider myself to be a citizen here. Hopefully, I will be after this episode. It's one of those meals that people eat on the daily basis. I think it might just be the most often chosen deal in a local food store. And I've often wondered, even earlier, many years ago at uni, I did wonder how people can do it every day. I remember especially one person that I worked with around uni time who struggled with great weight, I guess obesity is a good word for it, and would choose every day, a soft drink, a Mars bar of a sort, and then the sandwich. And so, to give the devil its due, let's assume that the sandwich is not that bad. You're still, out of your 3 pieces of the lunch you have for your day at work, 2 of them are just sugar, basically, and loads of chemicals. And then you have that sandwich, which is not far from the other 2 anyway. So, yeah, I think this might be one of those books, and certainly one of those episodes, which are, greatly disturbing. And I bet there are some things I will say today that you will not like, especially if you are living in the UK or United States, and especially if you are addicted, quite frankly, which is also what Chris van Tulleken mentions at some point. Funnily enough, a few weeks ago, if you remember, we've done an episode about Alan Carr's Easy Way to Quit Smoking, basically about the cold turkey approach of quitting smoking and the NLP behind that book, which basically asks you to not quit smoking until you finish the book. And funnily enough, Chris van Tulleken refers to that book by Alan Carr, and also mentions that you should not stop eating ultra-processed foods until you finish the book. And even more so, he encourages to go on a 100% ultra-processed food diet for a few days, and if you can hold on for longer, even longer, so you can realize just how bad what you call food is. because most importantly, at some point in the book, he points out that ultra-processed food is not actually food. It's a food-like, industrially made substance. And so today I've prepared a bigger episode for you. It might not be too easy. It's definitely, in a way, disturbing, and it will stir the pot, especially if you are from, sort of a local family that over the past 40 years has been living in those ultra-processed foods spaces without much thought given to them. And I don't say it lightly when I mean that this book really shook me. It shook me to the point that I instantaneously stopped eating majority, if not all, of the products that the author mentions. And in many ways there are some things in life sometimes I find, especially with some of the books, for example, the book about the central banking or the book about big pharma. There are some topics, some situations, some ideas that once you open that kind of worms, I have it. This is my experience, of course. It literally ingrains itself into my brain, and it sort of lingers on my mind as I go throughout my day. And then obviously, I'm sitting at lunchtime with my friends at work, and I observe what people eat. And then I'm going into the shop, and I realize just like how many of the products on the shelves now I don't want to eat anymore, and how bad the shop's options really are, and most importantly, I had this situation during one of social events recently. I literally stopped myself from grabbing a can of Coke and some crisps from the table, because as I was going down the line, sort of picking up what I want, because it was kind of like serve yourself buffet kind of thing, snacking. It was a beautiful occasion and all that. I just noticed, I sort of put my hand out, and then I withdrew, yet again, remembering yet another part of the book and the troublesome ideas that were offered there. So yeah, I guess without further ado, I prepared 3 major, wide topics, and at the very end of the episode I will also sort of distill the core message of the book for you. So if this is the extent to which you will go on your journey of learning why you should probably stop eating majority of the food-like substances out there and save yourself a few pennies, my point of the way I prepared this episode is that even though you will not read the book if you don't want to, you will still be able to benefit at least in 20% from the 20 most important aspects of that book, at least from my perspective. And as per usual, some things resonated with me and some things I understood, some things I didn't. So the best way for you to truly grasp and sort of tackle this topic is probably to read the book. I will also point in the link below the episode of one of the podcasts which talks about food. It's a different guy, but he also talks about eating healthy and stuff. And it's funny because it popped up on my feed a few days after I started reading the book. So I was like, well, that's just God giving me a sign to follow through and to also offer you this. So yeah, here we are, a lengthy episode ahead of us. I have some water here. As they say, the night is young, and so let's tackle this, guys. Let's face the music, And I'll start just by saying this. My hope for exploring difficult topics and for learning about the world, and for, you know, talking with people, and most importantly, talking with myself, tackling these ideas that trouble me. It's not to take away anyone's freedom, or even to take away my own freedom, rather to make myself a more informed human being, and so my decision making would be more skillful and informed. And in that same way, I would invite you to consider this topic from a perspective of, I can explore it for my own benefit, and if I don't like what I find, I still find it more valuable that I found it, because now I have a more informed choice I can make. Because as we will see, one of the major problems about this societal, in many ways, issue of ultra-processed people is the fact of our ignorance, and how, you know, the average consumer is unlikely to even start to comprehend or consider what are the problems and sort of obstacles on their way to making a conscious and informed choice. And I think the freedom of thought is definitely a first freedom that one should have. And so, there is not much freedom of thought if you don't know at all what you're talking about. And so here we are. I hope that after this episode you will make more informed choices. And even if you do consider and want to continue eating ultra-processed foods, at least you will be doing so knowing what are the potential drawbacks of that. And I think, as I keep saying, moderation is for people. Everything in moderation might be okay, with some extreme, examples not so. But in general, I find that in life, as long as you make informed choices, you can play with fire without getting burned. The very difficulty is to first inform yourself. And I guess, as I said, this podcast aims to help you do so. And myself, I do listen to my episodes from time to time to remind myself of some topics. So, yeah. Okay, guys. So let's jump into it, right? The first part that I wanted to explore is the size and scale of this problem. So I have some notes here for you, and also sort of elaborate on them as I go. So first one. In USA, UK, Australia or Canada, UPF, which is ultra-processed foods, make up for around 60% of consumed food. So even if we are prudent and assume that nowadays maybe it's better, although it's unlikely, even if we consider that 50% of all the food that people eat on average is ultra-processed, that's still, I would argue, at least 40% too many. 40% too much. Now, second one, topmost operation on children below 8 years old in USA is removing teeth due to tooth decay caused by sugar. So this is one of the statistics that the author points out in terms of, decay of teeth due to sugary sweets overconsumption, basically. And in the United States, the point here is made that the most popular operation on children below 8 years old is removing teeth, which basically got destroyed because of these children eating not what they should eat. And I would blame the parents on this part. I'm not a parent yet, so who I am to judge? And there is no judgment here, guys. Like, I'm literally just exploring the information I learned. But especially if you are a parent, and we cannot expect our children, being children, make informed choices. It's us, the parents, the carers, the older brothers, that should help them do so. And so, buying sugary sweets for children in excess basically lead to that and many other problems. And we'll explore those in a second. Now, the world has grown more obese proportionately to UPF sales. So you could track in the country, for example, in the UK, you could track the statistics of how many people over the past 40 years became obese or, gained weight. And it will be relatively proportionate to the UPF sales in that country, which is particularly visible if you explore statistics for as they say, third or second world countries and developing economies, and especially in countries with high levels of poverty, because poverty will play a huge role in this discussion. I'll explore that in a second. Now, on a single day in 2015 in Indonesia, palm trees fires emitted as much CO2 as USA in 1 year. So on a single day in 2015 in Indonesia, palm trees fires emitted as much CO2 as USA in 1 year. And this point, we've already explored the point of healthy and unhealthy eating around the countries. And we've mentioned the operations, the trouble for children. We've mentioned the obesity. And now we're talking about climate. From whichever standpoint you want to approach this topic, you will find reasons to care. If you are worried about Earth and about pollution that companies that produce these products cause, then don't buy those products. It's probably one of the best things you can do, much better than recycling, that will actually impact. Because remember, the way the market works is if there is no customer for a product, there is no reason to produce it, So we'll explore that in a second. And then finally, even to drive this point deeper, UPF companies such as Coca-Cola or Nestle are among the topmost plastic polluters in the world. And the eerily funny or funnily eerie part of this equation is that while these companies drive excess consumption and produce these one use containers, basically usually bottles or some sort of packages to contain these food-like substances, they also participate in a grand campaigning of just how much greatness they are involved in. On any package you will find that it's a recycled plastic, it's a bottle from recycled source, whatever. These all sound great, and in marketing, if anything, everything sounds great. But the truth of the matter is the majority of recycling is not recycled. And this is a huge rabbit hole of black hole, if anything, of troublesome ideas about just how many landfills and how much money is made from literally taking garbage and putting it away in places that people don't see. There is this big problem about, for example, UK sourced waste ends up in Southeast Asia, which basically is like paying someone to take your problems, and obviously they don't actually resolve the problem. They just take on the burden because the UK takes advantage of them in that regard, in that way. So it's all about profit, guys, and we'll explore that in a second. But the larger scheme of things and the way that in the book the author talks about it, he reminds us again and again that the whole point of any company is to generate profit, right? and to generate profit not for the society, unless it's some sort of an organization, a charity organization that truly does consider the society to be their shareholders, which is unlikely, but to generate profits for the shareholders. So whoever is in charge of the company and whoever is paying those people in charge are the people who will drive the decision making of that given company. And the biggest trick that is being played on us by these companies that produce food-like substances of UPF is they will make you feel as if what they provide to you is what you need and want, while the only goal for them in the long run is to generate profit from you buying, and buying more than you need, and buying more, if anything, than you should. And so there is a huge interest in lobbying and making these products to be as wanted, as delicious, as easily consumed, and also as impossible to stop consuming, about which we'll talk in a second, so they can generate more profit while they're keeping their costs low, which is another big trap, you know. This is a sort of a side point, but it helped me consider this in that regard. We, in many ways, in many societies and in many forms, when we talk with each other, there is this idea of trying to find the best deal, right? And this is the problem about poverty in terms of how poverty forces people to eat UPF. Products that are nowadays, products that are truly sourced and organic are the more expensive products. It is much cheaper to go to McDonald's and buy a cheeseburger, probably for around £1 or £2, or maybe $3 or $4. I don't know how are the prices of McDonald's burgers in the United States today, in comparison to buying ingredients to make yourself a quality burger from real sourced, healthy, organic beef, and with real bread and with real tomato sauce rather than some UPF produced ketchup and such, and from real cheese rather than cheese that has not seen cheese. There is a Polish phrase that basically means that something did not even have a contact with the substance it's supposedly related to. And obviously, if the companies benefit from creating products that are cheaper because you as a consumer consider this to be a reason for you to buy something, if your choices are driven by prices, then the company is pretty much obliged to give you as cheap of a product as possible. But it's not like they are taking on the cost of that product being cheap, right? They will expedite as much of the price of that product, the cost of that product, onto you or onto other stakeholders, for example, Earth, or for example, a local community that will suffer because of abuse that they will get from this huge conglomerate taking advantage of them. The point here is this idea, for example, of cutting down rainforest in South America to have beef, to basically raise beef there and raise cows and such, or to cut trees in Indonesian rainforest and turn that rainforest into a one palm tree forest, which is basically like an orchard in a sense, because the palm oil is the cheapest and most most dense of the potential oils to use, which is also one of the most unhealthy for human body. So the scale of this endeavor is fitting to what the market wants. If the market wants cheap food, then the companies will try to make their margins by making it as cheap as possible. And obviously we know, if you've ever bought something really, really, really cheap, you will know that it's cheap because it breaks much faster than if you buy something of true quality. Quality is is something you have to pay for, right? In the same way that if you're, if you're enjoying a meal, there is a difference between enjoying a meal that is of great quality than enjoying a meal, like a pot noodle, which might still taste, but the quality is not really there. And this is the whole point. The big food industry, those companies that we talk about here, discussing UPF, basically were on a quest. How can we make as much money as possible from as little and as bad products as possible, and somehow convince the customer to buy it anyway? And this is where the whole idea of selling you something that will make you addicted, something that you think tastes nice, while at the same time it has no quality whatsoever, will make sense. And this is so, I don't know, maybe not evil in a sense that, I don't want this to be a moral story. There's no morality in this. It's business. It's just business. But this is so troublesome for me to wrestle with. If you consider that the only reason why something is ultra processed that tastes nice is the fact that the company engineered it so it tastes nice for you, even though it's made of garbage, to consider that and to come to terms with it, I think literally switches your paradigm. It did for me. It's overwhelming for me to think about these things and to share them with you. If anything, it's intense, man. Not only are we driving these companies to go to such lengths as to cut down rainforests or grow palm trees everywhere instead of allowing orangutans and other animals to live in the wild, but we're also actually buying it happily, and we're enjoying it because we act like addicts. And this is not there is a reason why Chris van Tulleken mentions Alan Carr's book. He truly approaches ultra-processed diet as an addiction. And now let's go into that. Why is it an addiction, right? Because you may say I buy cheap products because I'm poor, and that's a fair argument to make. The question is though, which products are you buying, and is this really impossible for you to address in any other way? Because personally, I don't spend that much money on food either, and I just cook at home. I'm paying in time of cooking instead of paying in money for someone to cook for me. And of course, I'm not ideal in that I'm not perfect. I still eat some foods that are processed, not if they're ultra processed, but they can still be processed. Majority of foods are processed in some way, but it's about finding the balance. And we'll come back to poverty in a second. So for the time being, let's stick to the nutrition part, right? So an interesting thing that the author explores in the book is obviously this question of how can I determine if something is ultra processed, right? That's a good question. You could ask, this all sounds great, Wojtek, but how do I know? Now, the author gives two options for you to explore, two sort of avenues to use, two questions maybe, two frames of reference to use. The first one is the question you can ask yourself in terms of what is this food's purpose. So, does this food nurture me? And does this food make me feel satiated, right? Our bodies are amazing machines in the same way as animals, apart from Labradors, apparently. The majority of us know, especially humans, if we're eating, if we're eating not too fast, and if we're eating not staring at a screen, and if we're eating not a UPF food, we will feel satiated at some point. It's really difficult to overeat if you eat something natural, something healthy. You can give it an experiment, and the author offers an experiment to make. Give your child or yourself, maybe your spouse or your boyfriend could do this experiment for you. Give yourself or your child one bowl of cereal, which will be like totally sugar-free cereal, maybe some granola or something that has no extra ingredients, is only, let's say, nuts and some flakes. No sugar, no nothing, and use whole milk or maybe lactose-free milk, and do the same bowl with the same amount of milk and with a similar amount of flakes, but add for 1 spoon of those flakes, add a relatively proportionate amount of sugar and mix it in. And do that experiment, especially with your kids. I think it's a good one. The author does it with his daughter, I believe. See what happens when you give them one and the other. In one case, the child or yourself will eat and might finish the bowl, but after finishing the bowl, they will feel satiated. In the other case, the child or yourself is likely to finish it all and then ask for seconds. And think about it. The size of the portion did not change. The caloric proportion did not change, because you will weigh it in a way that is the same amount of calories in both. I should have probably said that earlier, but you're listening to a podcast, so you can still chase that up. So the only thing that is different is the fact that in one of these pieces, these bowls, you added sugar, and in the other you don't have sugar. Now this is important. Sugar and salt are the two ingredients that are found in nature that make our food more delicious. Okay? And this is an important factor, right? Sugar and salt help us enjoy our food. They bring out the tastes in food. And in and of themselves, of course, like anything, they're not bad. And even in excess, they can be bad, but not as bad as ultra-processed foods that are made with them. And now, why is this the case? That a child will eat more sugary flakes, meal, than not. The one without sugar. The thing here is all about the glycemic index. And don't quote me on this, refer to the book or find an expert. But the way I understand it in my layman's terms, trying to grasp this idea, I'll try to explore for you. Our insulin level in the body and our glycemic index of a product determines how quickly our body recognizes sugar, carbohydrates, to enter our bloodstream. The more quickly you consume sugar, for example in a fizzy drink, the more quickly your insulin resistance kicks in, which signals to the body to store the excess of that sugar and all the other calories that you're consuming for later, because you're already feeling the levels of energy that come from sugars, which are like the faster energy, let's say, fuel than protein, for example, to be released. And this is double-edged problem, really. On one hand, you will eat more because your feeling of satiation, the feeling of a full belly, will not be able to be activated as fast as possible, as fast as needed, as fast as it should, because you're already sending another much faster signal that makes the body to store this energy for later in a form of fat. And secondly, this also allows you to eat more because sugar and salt, but sugar in particular, is highly addictive. Now, this is something that I've already mentioned to you before on the podcast, I think 2 years ago. There is a claim, and you can look it up online, that sugar is more addictive or as addictive as greatly addictive drugs, or maybe more, such as cocaine, for example. And the problem with sugar, obviously, is it's very difficult to overdose. And companies such as Coca-Cola actually found ways for us to drink more sugar than we can ever imagine to eat in the same sitting. And this is another troubling thing that I heard in the book, and this is just sprouting so many thoughts. You know the idea of a sickly sweet feeling, right? If you take a spoonful of honey, or maybe a tablespoon of honey or a tablespoon of sugar, try it. Put it in your mouth and see how you feel. You will find that it's too sweet, right? We have receptors that allow us to signal to our brain that there is too much sugar in something. It's basically because sugar is, this sweet, caloric food is just so intense for us and sends the signal of with high glycemic index, sends the signal for insulin resistance and all that I explored a moment ago. It sends so much energy into our body so quickly that the body sort of tells you to stop. In the same way that you might, throw up if you've drunk too much of alcohol, because ultimately alcohol is poison, and so your body at some point will tell you that it's not great, let it out. The thing is, because of it, you cannot truly enjoy 30 grams of sugar, right, in one sitting, or 3 tablespoons of honey. So how is it possible that you can drink a full can of Coca-Cola within a few minutes and not feel that sickly sweet feeling? The point here is about the mix. Apparently in Coca-Cola you will find caffeine and phosphoric acid, if I remember correctly, which are 2 ingredients that are greatly bitter. They are so bitter that the company figured out they can be sweetened by adding sugar to them. And they even figured out that if you give someone a cold, which is why all the fizzy drinks are suggested to be drunk cold, if you give someone a cold product with such a great amount of sugar, because it's cold, it seems less sweet than it really is, which is an interesting fact. Try it. Let your Coke stand outside of the fridge for a day, and then drink it next to a cold Coke and see which one tastes more sweet when you drink it. They figured out a way of allowing us to drink 30 grams of sugar in a can without feeling the sickly sweetness. And why is it a problem for us? Well, first of all, the more you consume of something, the more addicted you become. It sounds reasonable, right? If I smoke once a day, I'm addicted to a cigarette once a day. Once I end up smoking 30 cigarettes a day, I'm likely to continue smoking as many cigarettes in the days to come. because our body has a tolerance that is constantly, in a way, raised. You can truly drive yourself to over excess by engaging in something more and more. And it can also be, for the good or the bad of the things. The point for this part is, though, because sugar is highly addictive and because it is very tasty and because it is highly caloric ingredient, and we've been trained for centuries of our existence that, in nature we could go without eating food for a while, especially when we were running around in the snow, as the early humans, and we might have struggled to find some high caloric foods. So whenever we would find honey, for example, we would eat it all as much as possible, because that would allow us to, keep that energy in a form of fat for later, because there might be a time when we cannot eat. And now we don't have that problem anymore. You can go to the shop, and unless you're in a very extreme situation, or maybe you're camping away from civilization, you're unlikely to struggle to find a means to eat every day. But our, simple habits of centuries are still here, which is why we're drawn to highly caloric foods. We enjoy them. And sugar is obviously quite nice, right? Now, whatever this sugar consumption might do to us, the biggest trouble is the further addiction to that substance. And an interesting and probably horrifying thing for you to hear as well from this book is the fact that no sugar, so artificial sweeteners, are not only even greater addictive and greater sweet than sugar itself, they're also much more unhealthy. So ironically, if you want to drink a Coca-Cola after this episode, you should choose a normal classic Coca-Cola and not a Coca-Cola Zero or Diet or whatever else you will find on the shelf. These products, the artificial sweeteners, are even more UPF, even more bad for you in many other ways than the sugar itself. And if you're still in the paradigm that Diet Coke has no calories, I would like you to reconsider that idea. In nature, there is this idea that no energy is ever destroyed, right? You cannot have an empty calorie. There is no such thing. There is either a calorie or there isn't. And so you might not be getting a calorie of sugar in that drink, but you are getting some sort of calorie in there. And I would not want to drink bleach over sugary drink if one of them, if bleach would be claiming to have no calories. It doesn't sound to me like a healthy alternative. And many of these products, and I truly, I would, encourage you to read this book, truly. Many of these products are very similar to bleach. So now a little story for you, just to maybe drive the point home before we go any further. And I will come back to how to determine UPF. During the Second World War, apparently the German army had to figure out a way to find butter for soldiers. And a chemist who was working with machinery in the German industrial complex, let's say, discovered that there is a side effect, let's say a waste product of a production of oil for tanks and aircrafts that could be, after some processing and adding some kind of tasty additions, could be heated and made into a sort of solutable fat. And obviously in and of itself that fat was truly chemical. There was nothing natural about it. But in the process of this industrial production, he managed to create margarine, right? Which is a butter-like substance, but it's not food. And they actually gave it to the German soldiers in the late part of the Second World War. And unfortunately, we have no reliable sort of research done after that on the effect of these products on soldiers as they ate them on their sandwiches. But the point of the story is that this is the kind of production that you might encounter when you really dive deep into how your UPF is made. There is a theme of finding a waste product and deciding how can we make this garbage into something people will want to buy, so we can make even more money instead of spending money to get rid of this waste product. And just let that sink in, you know. There are companies, and morally good or right, it doesn't matter. It's a part of the game, I guess. And there is a saying, don't hate the player, hate the game, right? There are companies out there that are looking after profit, and their profit is made on you buying their products. And if they can make a way for you to buy the product, they are indifferent to what are your outcomes, unless the goal of the company is to help you, which usually it isn't. So we should not be angry about it, but we should be wary of it. Coming back to how to determine what is UPF. So as I said, the first one is, does it nurture you and make you feel satiated? And if that's the case, if after eating the meal you don't want second, third, fourth, you cannot stop yourself from eating, and after the meal you feel like you're actually feeling better and nurtured, and the next day you're feeling great, then that's probably a good sign that this food is for you. And a better rule of thumb, maybe a bit more technical for anyone out there who would like to go on UPF-free diet, is to ask yourself this. Look at the label and ask yourself, does this label have any ingredient that my mom or my grandmother would not recognize? In other words, really, truly, is there any ingredient there that you don't recognize, or your mom or your grandma would not recognize? Because to be honest, I think even ourselves, we know which ingredients is real and which ingredient is, processed, made. So not maybe real, but organic, right? If something is from a natural source, it will be something that occurs in nature. So all the emulsifiers, maltodextrose, fructose syrup, all of these and enter numbers and all that, all of these substances which you cannot just find in nature, they are a sign that this food is a food-like substance, but it's not food, and it's a UPF, which is an ultra-processed food. Now, the amazing horrific part about it all, as I said before, is that the companies will do whatever they can to sell you their product. And they go to great lengths to ensure that their product is consumed. So, for example, Pringles, which I loved so much, and me and my girlfriend would eat them, all the time, really, at some point. We really loved them. We used to really love them. Pringles is a staple of food engineering, food-like substance engineering. They seem to be like chips, yet they have, I think, less than 7% of a potato in them. They are made into a certain shape and in a certain way for you to enjoy to the maximum the act of eating them without ever feeling satiated. This is why if you buy a big pack of Pringles and you're alone, you will eat it all and you will eat it quick. Because it's engineered to make you want to eat more right here, right now, and to enjoy every crunch, every bite. It's the same with Doritos. They are perfectly made into this substance that your body seems to love, while you're not getting any satisfaction from it. And coming back to Coca-Cola, have you ever wondered why is it advertised as a refreshing and sort of how they call it, to sort of kill your thirst drink, yet after you drink a few gulps, or after you even finish the bottle, you still feel thirsty? Well, obviously it's because you've drank so much sugar, and sugar doesn't kill thirst. If anything, it encourages thirst even more so. So that's why, for example, if, after a run, when you're really thirsty and dehydrated, you drink Coca-Cola, you will feel as if you're getting the thirst over, but the moment you stop drinking, yet again you're thirsty. And this is the same with those crisps and everything. The processed food is made in a way for you to consume it, not for anything else. It's made for you to eat it and to buy more and to continue buying and to choose it over other stuff, but never actually to nurture you or, make your body feel better. So we now know how to determine UPF as a rule of thumb, and we now know the challenges of these foods. Let's turn to the societal problem. So I mentioned earlier that one of the spaces that is most correlated with harmful diet is poverty. So in terms of UK, for example, government in the UK spends as much in a year on dealing with UPF related issues such as health, issues of people, obesity, as it would take to end poverty altogether. This is a big claim, and the author explores this in depth in, I think, 4th or 5th chapter of the book. The idea of dealing with consequences of our actions and with the symptoms rather than the disease, the causes of that symptoms, seems to be a theme, and for a good reason. We've seen it in big pharma when we talked about how pharmaceutical companies are actually at a conflict of interest with our health because they want to keep selling us those medicines. So, an average pharmaceutical company is not actually trying to make you feel better, it's trying to make a profit. In the same way, big food is not actually trying to make you feel better, it's there to make profit. And here, an ideal world would be that the government would fight for us, right? So if a government knows that the problem of obesity and the problem of you having health issues is related to these companies taking advantage of you and your kids and selling you products that are food-like substances that actually are to your detriment, then the government could do something about it. But that's where the conflict of interest really arises. Now, do you remember the troubling ideas that I've shared in the episode about Dr. Fauci and WHO during COVID? Apparently, it is basically the same in terms of conflict of interest for big food. So companies that fund research regarding healthy diets are the same companies that sell unhealthy foods. Coca-Cola, according to the author, funded over 400,000 research papers that related to reasons why it is not the calories that you take in that cause you to become obese and unhealthy. It is the lack of exercise. They have literally used their funds to gaslight the society to think that they should work out more and, be healthy because of that. And an interesting thing that the author points in that regard, and don't get me wrong, I go to the gym, I go to exercise, I love exercising, you should do too, everyone should exercise, it's just great. But an interesting thing that the author points out is this misunderstanding surrounding this idea of food, consumption of calories versus burning of calories. Apparently, our body is so incredible that if you work out throughout your day, even if you work out really, really extremely, you don't necessarily burn more calories than someone who didn't work out that day. Unless, the extreme difference, especially in your size and your lifestyle, is there. But assuming that you're the same person and on one day you work out and on the other day you don't, apparently on both of these days, on average, you will burn the same amount of calories. Because if you work out, then your body will make sure to slow the burning of calories on some other activity throughout your day in a way that it will still burn the similar amount of calories over time. This is basically this exquisite organ of ours, the body we have, the amazing system that we have, that keeps us in a state of fair, equilibrium. There is no, from the sort of survival perspective, it is not efficient to risk burning too many calories in one given day and then, struggling to have anything to burn the next day. So it makes sense that if we had to run away from a tiger in the woods back in the day before, we would then sort of recuperate some of that energy by saving it later on in that same day. And in the same manner, it's not your problem with the lack of exercise. If you do exercise even a little bit, that causes you to gain weight. It's the things you eat and the excess of them that you intake. It is much more likely, and if not certain, according to the author, that your overconsumption is the reason why you got fat, if you did, and not your lack of exercise. And especially, this can be especially disheartening, if you are already slightly overweight and if you want to change it, and then you go to the gym and you don't change your food behavior, but you act at the gym, so you're changing your workout behavior, it can be very disheartening, right? To not see much change in your day-to-day health over time. And the thing is, it's mostly due to your diet that you have the troubles. It's not due to the exercise. Of course, we all have to move, but unless you're an extreme case that doesn't move at all, I would say, according to the author, start with the diet. Start to cutting out all these ultra-processed foods, especially sugary drinks that are the culprit of so many of these problems, and exchanging them for water, or water with lemon if you want some taste. Now, in terms of that poverty, right, and this idea that let's just finish up with the conflict of interest. So according to the author, and this all makes sense, the organizations that are in charge of researching the health needs are often, and research papers are often subsidized by companies that sell these products to us. So, as a scientist trying to make a living, what would you prefer to do? What would you choose yourself? And really ask yourself that and be honest. If I offered you £2 million for researching the benefits of working out to increase your health, and then I would offer you £20,000 for researching the negative effects of overeating sugary sweets on your health, which would you choose? Which paper would you rather write? you would probably find a reason to still consider your paper to be, helpful. And in a way it can be, because it's good to know what are the benefits of working out in terms of becoming healthier. But you're kind of shining the light in one direction while you allow these companies to peddle their products to the consumers in the shadows. And these conflicts of interest and the lobbying that goes on in the government and in the public opinion, and especially advertising, the majority of news and the majority of websites and TV stations have to make money of advertisements. If you're taking someone's money, you're much less inclined to challenge or dismiss their ideas, right? You don't bite the hand that feeds you, as they say. So if I rely on Coca-Cola to fund my podcast, I'm unlikely to say no to their asking me to put a Coca-Cola here and every now and then, take a sip on it. This is the whole problem of conflicts of interest, and this is a really black hole, a can of worms in terms of how the world runs and how deep these troubles go. And so we've talked about the price and profit, which drive efficiency and basically drive the world detriment, right? The companies are trying to make as much as possible with as little cost. And of course, this means that those that are in poverty state, those that cannot afford better alternatives because the better alternatives are too expensive, while these really bad choices are cheap, they're actually the ones suffering the most. And a way to think about it, to change it, if you want to change it on a societal level, is for the government to stop allowing big corporations that produce ultra-processed food to avoid tax or to sell these products so cheap. Rather, maybe a good idea would be to subsidize and support organic foods, making them cheaper, while raising prices of those foods that are unhealthy. Something interesting that apparently is already being done in Brazil and South American countries is black labeling on the bottles. So, for example, instead of having a traffic light system, which is very misleading in UK, for example, we have this traffic light system, which basically shows you, like, for example, red, yellow, green in terms of how much of sugar, how much of salt, how much of fat is in any given product, and supposedly it's suggesting that it's somewhat healthy. Instead of that, apparently in some of the countries such as Brazil and others, they're already introducing like black labels, basically similar to cigarettes, for example, saying that this product is really bad for your health. And so basically they're forcing these companies to tell the truth about what the product is, rather than whitewash their deeds by offering you a green light for the amount of sugar you might have on your Coca-Cola, which is funny. On Coca-Cola you can find the green light for sugar, even though there is like 30 grams of sugar in it. So I don't know what's it relative to, but it's certainly not green. And the whole point is that normal food, homemade food, healthy food and natural food should become the gold standard, right? If we subsidize local farmers, if we help products, if we help companies to promote and sell products that are healthy, they will be incentivized to do so. If we start buying healthy foods, the companies will provide us with more healthy foods because they are driven by profit. They are indifferent to our health. So, the one thing that you can do for yourself today and for your family today is just start buying products that are at least not unhealthy. They don't have to be great of health to begin with, but you can do a lot with products that are just natural. Eating many more veggies than you probably do, and choosing to maybe cook more of your meals than eat ready-made, especially, which is, that's another troublesome fact. And I to be honest, I don't want to talk about this on the podcast. I don't want to completely shatter your views, but just one thing I will say is, if you are buying ready meals in those microwavable meals from a cling film, kind of like that, in UK it's popular to buy like a lasagna, for example, which is in plastic, wrapped in plastic, and you just sort of put a few holes in the plastic and put it into the microwave to heat it up. I will just say, especially if you're a man, don't heat it up in plastic. Take it out of that plastic, put it into a bowl, cover it with a plate and put it into the microwave. This is because microplastics from those are already researched to, and sort of there are studies done, which the author points out to, that suggest that, for example, these microplastics may cause you to be infertile and may cause you to have really big problems with your vulnerable parts, let's say. And so these are the ideas. Like, if you cook more at home, if you buy products that are just one ingredient product, a potato that is a potato instead of a crisp that didn't see a potato. If you buy milk instead of a milk-like substance, if you buy butter, true butter, instead of a just like butter kind of margarine or whatever you call it, you will already be free from these ideas, and you will be free from UPF. And over time, you will probably have more energy, feel much better, and obviously you will be much less likely to have the diseases that are brought up by these substances. And most importantly, I think, especially if you want to lose weight, you will lose weight, or at least you will not gain more of that, because you will stop over consuming, and this is a huge part of it. Now, the core messages, because I'm mindful of our time, although I did anticipate that this is going to be a longer episode, so I hope you're still with me. The core messages that the author points out at the very end is this: if it's soft and calorie dense, and which makes it to be eaten faster than your body should to feel full, then it's probably a UPF. So notice at what pace you're eating something, and notice if something is like kind of pre-chewed, which is a nasty idea. But it's an idea. He points out that the majority of these ultra-processed foods, after a few bites, feel the same, feel like kind of a soft pudding, which basically means that because we don't chew them so long, they disallow us to feel satiated. And yet again, it's just this idea of making the food more consumable quicker, so you buy more of it. And obviously this drives overeating. Now, some of the additives can drive gut microbiome detriment and leaking, and this is huge. You don't know, if you don't know the ingredients you're eating, you're risking your gut and your stomach and basically your body to be struggling with substances that is ultimately not for them. So just be aware of that. That's huge. And then finally, the purpose of UPF is to make money. So you would buy and consume as much as possible for the smallest cost possible. The only point of UPF is for you to consume more, because they will make money out of it. And remember, don't hate the player, hate the game. realize this, be ready to consider these ideas. And if this episode makes you quit UPF, that's great. If it doesn't, that's okay. For me, it was the book was definitely a huge world shifting book, one of the more powerful I've encountered recently. And I've already told my girlfriend, we've already agreed that we're gonna at most attend a McDonald's or some sort of UPF parlor at most once a week. And I think we're gonna do like maybe an idea of a cheat meal. So once a week we can eat something unhealthy, but for the most part we will just stop buying any of these food-like substances. My invitation for you for this week, not surprising, apart from obviously getting the book yourself and listening to it or reading it, is to go shopping. Once you go shopping next time, maybe you need to buy your weekly grocery, or maybe if you buy like we buy in UK, you might pop into the shop tomorrow during lunchtime for a snack. Just read the labels on the products that you pick up. And even if you will still buy them, just acknowledge how many of the products that you end up walking out of the shop with are, based on these definitions, considered to be ultra-processed foods or food-like substances. And this is most importantly because I want you to become aware, like I became aware 2 days ago, of the scale of this problem. I wanted to buy myself chips, crisps, to eat with a movie the other day. And it took me some time to find crisps which didn't have anything else apart from, potato, salt, and some, I think, oil, some sort of rapeseed oil or whatever, which is not great, but it's within the realms. I can imagine that it's not that great, but basically my point is it was really difficult for me to find crisps that were without any sort of substances that I did not recognize, and I couldn't fathom that were made in nature. So yeah, next time you go shopping, figure it out, see how many of these products you're buying are UPF, and maybe consider if you can find something that is not UPF. Other than that, thank you so much for listening. I will just remind you, if you'd like to support the podcast, the best way is to subscribe and to follow the link below, to click the follow button on Spotify, or to share it with a friend. And other than that, I just wish you to live and lead a healthy and a better life. And so it's one of those books that will definitely promote it if you let it. So yeah, I hope you have an amazing week, and a healthy one. Stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.